Hi, everybody. Welcome to Phil and Dave's Excellent Adventures. Just Dave here. Today, I'm talking about The Fabelmans. It's going to be a spoiler review, so if you have not seen the movie yet and you are concerned about spoilers, I would suggest you go and watch the movie first before you watch this review. For the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be out of town, so I'll be making up all of the Oscar nominees for Best Picture that I haven't watched yet. I'll have my Ant-Man review up in March. So, as far as The Fabelmans, the movie is basically based on Steven Spielberg's actual life. So it's sort of a semi-autobiography about him and growing up and his love for filmmaking. As far as what I liked about the movie, overall, I thought the cast was great. Gabriel LaBelle was in here as Sammy Fabelman, the sort of Steven Spielberg type. He was a little kid from The Predator. We also had Mateo Zorian in here. Michelle Williams was great. Mateo Zorian was the young Sammy. Michelle Williams is great in here as well. Paul Dano, really, really strong performance. I was really impressed by him. And Seth Rogen, also quite good in this. Overall, all the performances were very good. I thought the opening scene in the movies, I really liked that a lot. The way that the parents are sort of convincing him to go because he's scared, and the sort of two different approaches his parents take. Whereas his dad takes this very kind of logical, analytical kind of engineering type thing where he explains how film works and how it's sort of creating an illusion of movement and all of that. And his mom kind of does this more emotional thing where she kind of explained to him about how it's going to make him feel and sort of the that kind of stuff. So I like that. And I will say, I'll talk more about that later, I think. I really like seeing that he had supportive parents. Something about that just really kind of warmed my heart. It's nice to know that, his mom very, creatively or very cleverly sort of figured out like, oh, he's obsessed with the train wreck from The Greatest Show on Earth. And that's why he keeps crashing his train. So if I let him film it, then he can just watch the film over and over again. I don't have to worry about him hurting his train or hurting himself. And I really like that. I really appreciated that. And I don't know, it's just nice to see parents who support their kids, like, I don't know. My mom was always supportive, but my dad wasn't as much. So like the fact that he had both parents that they were doing it and they were both doing it from like kind of different angles, I think really helped. And I've heard a lot of stories about real people who have had parents like this, where one is kind of more analytical and one's a little more creative. And often they end up, making their kids end up being very creative people who go on to do interesting things. So I like that a lot. I like the music, the score. It was done by John Williams, who was pretty much retired, before this came out. But then he decided to do this for Spielberg, and I believe he's also doing the next Indiana Jones movie. So maybe he's not quite retired yet, and that's good. I like the setting. It's set mostly in the 50s and I believe 60s, right? And maybe 70s in the end, no, but 50s, it's 60s. And yeah, it's a good time period. It's always interesting to see. I like the clothes and the style and the cars and all that stuff in that period. So it's always cool. Overall, I thought the story was pretty good. Just watching, I guess it's sort of a coming of age story, and it's kind of Steven Spielberg's first real coming of age movie. He's done some kind of stuff about, and a lot of stuff about childhood, but this is the first kind of, Buildings Roman kind of thing where you get to see a kid turn into a man, I guess. I thought the fact that it's about filmmaking, it was always nice. I like watching movies about filmmaking. It's always very inspiring and it makes you want to watch them. And of course, the Oscars like these kind of movies too, which is why often movies about movies end up getting nominated for Best Picture. I like the way that he handled the bully, the kid who, well, there's two different bullies, I suppose, but the way he handled the one bully, the nicer bully, I suppose, of the two, which I guess is based on a real story. It really happened to Steven Spielberg. At some point, that guy called him up right after Duel came out, his first major movie, and congratulated him. And I think the guy was like working as a car mechanic or a car salesman or something like that. I think the way that he showed them. Oh yeah, one thing I really liked about this is when he found out about his mom's infidelity. Now at first I didn't love that as much because I really wanted it to focus more on the filmmaking, and I didn't care so much about his parents' relationship, even though I'm sure it was very important to him, and I know it's important to Spielberg because divorce is a theme in a lot of his movies. But yeah, just for me personally, I'm like, I'd rather, hear more about the kid getting into filmmaking than his parents. But I did like the way that once he realized what was happening with his mom and Benny, he, instead of telling her and confronting her, he, well, kind of was just standoffish for a while, but then he just showed her the film that he had made of her infidelity. And I thought it was interesting too, because he didn't do it in like an aggressive or a mean way. He did it in more of like I can't say, I don't know what else to say. And so she shows him, and when she comes out and he's crying, he's not mad, he's not yelling at her, he's like, it's okay, I understand, but like, so I like that. And I actually really liked the way a lot of that stuff was kind of handled. I like the stuff with the disposable plates, mostly because at first I'm like, what's going on here? Why is she, does she have like a germ phobia, or is there some sort of an issue? And then they do eventually explain, once Judd Hirsch's character shows up, that, oh, she's got piano hands. She doesn't want to mess up her hands by doing the dishes. So, okay, that's cool. But I don't know. I like weird little idiosyncrasies like that. I think it's because I had kind of a weird childhood growing up. So whenever I see that, it instantly sort of endears the people to me, because I'm like, oh, okay, they do something a little different. As long as they're not hurting anybody, then like, yeah, why not? I really like the stuff with David Lynch at the end, playing John Ford, of course. John Ford, they've got all the posters up. So you get Grapes of Wrath and The Searchers and The Quiet Man and The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, which is great. And I love David Lynch, and I love that they he cast him to play John Ford. Apparently, David Lynch didn't want to do it, and he actually had to ask him over several weeks. And then Lynch finally agreed, only on the condition that there were bags of Cheetos on set. I don't know, that's David Lynch. But yeah, that was really fun. That was really cool. I like the way that he handled it, the way that he played it. And I really like the thing about the horizon, and I'd heard people describe this. Kevin Smith had already explained it. And I think Jay from Red Letter Media I'd seen talk about it. So I knew the entire scene. I'd heard a couple people talk about it, and still great scene. It worked out really well. And I like thing with horizon at the end that he shifts it so the horizon is not in the middle anymore. And like, yeah, it's perfect. It's great. It's a great ending. Really good. As far as what I disliked about the movie, even though I thought his performance was great, Paul Dano came across as a little too young for me. I might be wrong. Actually, I didn't look up his age, but I believe he's a little younger than me. And I think Michelle Williams is a little older than me. And Dano does look young. I assume he's probably in his mid 30s or so. Certainly old enough to have a child that age, but just for whatever reason, maybe it's because I knew him as a kid too, and like Little Miss Sunshine and stuff. So seeing him playing an adult man with a child, I'm just like, weird. And also, he doesn't seem to age much throughout the movie. They put a little gray in his hair and they do stuff like that, but I guess it would have been nice. And I guess you don't age much between being 8 or 9, however old Sammy was at the beginning, and being 19, 20, but still 10 years. I don't know. I guess I would have liked a little more aging, a little more gray hair or something like that. I thought, again, Seth Rogen's performance was great, and I really liked his character, but there's something about him that just seems a little too contemporary looking. And maybe again it's because I'm used to seeing him in stuff like, Knocked Up and 40-Year-Old Virgin. And I know he did, Freaks and Geeks, first thing I saw him, which was a period kind of thing. And he didn't bother me as much as that. But for whatever reason, there's this scene where he's kind of talking to Sammy when he goes to buy him the camera, which is a great scene. I actually really liked it. And I liked the way he handled it. But for whatever reason, there's just something that struck out to me like, I don't buy him as a guy in the 50s or 60s, whenever that was. Yeah. And I also thought, I like Judd Hirsch. I feel bad saying anything, but his performance was maybe a little over the top as the uncle. Again, I don't think it was offensive or anything like that, but maybe just a little broad for me. I feel like you could have dialed it back maybe 10%. But still good, and a fun character, and I understand why he was there for the purpose of the story. Movie is a little slow. It's a little too long. It's over 2 hours. One other thing that bothered me is that the other siblings, we don't really see or hear much from them. I think he's got at least 3 other siblings in the movie, and I don't know about in real life, but as someone who grew up in a big family with 5 kids, you don't really get a lot of the attention focused on you. You do occasionally, but you've also got other siblings that have other things going on. I understand this is a movie about Steven Spielberg or about Sammy Fabelman, and so of course it's going to focus on him. But it just seemed like in a lot of ways the other kids were just kind of there, except for the one daughter who does kind of have a little bit to do. For the most part, the other kids are just kind of there. And so it would have been nice to see just a little bit more from them, just something going on. Like, I don't know, maybe they're dating somebody, or they've got some other thing, or they want to do something, or they want to be in the movies, or they're jealous because their parents didn't buy them a camera or something like that. Just because having siblings, that's what my experience is always more like. And one thing that always kind of bothered me when I saw stuff about people and kids, they were usually only children, or they only had 2 kids in the family, whereas my family, there's 5. It's a little more difficult to, kind of balance all of that, I guess. The tornado scene at the beginning was a little weird, just because, the mom, I think it was right after she bought the monkey, right? And then she's kind of arguing about Benny, or maybe they were arguing about something else, but they're arguing about Benny and everything else. And then this tornado happens, and then she just grabs the kids and then runs off in the car to go chase down this tornado. And it's fun. It's an interesting scene. You see the stuff with the carts, which sort of came back up in, Jurassic Park later. So cool, but it also I'm like, what's going on here? Is this woman mentally unstable? Like, should should those kids be taken away from her? Like it's a little irresponsible, definitely, to be doing that. And there's one thing with like just being sort of capricious or carefree and having a good time. And then there's also like endangering people. So that was a little bit where I'm like, okay. And as much as I dislike the relationship drama, I did like that it actually made him a better filmmaker. That it actually sort of showed him evolving and kind of taught him more about how to get emotion into his films and how to get like elicit an emotional response from his actors. So that was kind of interesting. And then other than that, I just thought there was a little too much high school stuff. Once he got to high school and it got into like dating and the girls and all that, and I just didn't care as much. I'm a 40-year-old man. I don't really care about high school drama, and I understand he's a kid and I understand why it is, but at that point it started to feel a little bit like an episode of Dawson's Creek or something where I'm like, okay, I would have loved this if I were 18, but not as much now. So then that movie is directed by Steven Spielberg. It was written by Spielberg and Tony Kushner. They worked together a bit. Tony Kushner also wrote Munich, Lincoln, West Side Story, and he's most famous for writing Angels in America, the play. This is Spielberg's first writing credit, though, since AI in like 2001. First thing he's written, at least credited for writing in like about 20 years. It is, somewhat autobiographical. And I guess because I'm dumb, that confused me for a bit. I know it's called The Fabelmans. I know it's about people called The Fabelmans. But when they kept calling him Sammy, for whatever dumb reason, I'm like, did Steven Spielberg go by Sam when he was a kid? Why are they calling him Sammy? And then by the yeah, it's not 100% supposed to be him. And so then I'm like, okay, well, yeah. And, so it's this kind of thing where as I'm watching, I'm going like, how much of this is real? How much of this is fake? How much of this is imagined? And I sort of initially at least assumed the whole, because I knew that his parents had gotten divorced as a kid, and I knew that had affected him pretty profoundly because it comes up in a lot of his work. But realizing that as I'm watching him, I'm going, all this Benny stuff, this must be fabricated. But no, it's all kind of true. It actually seems so. Benny is based on a real man named Bernie Adler, who his mother ended up marrying in real life after divorcing his father, and they stayed married until she passed away. So and a lot of the stories in here, the stuff with the bully is true. Quite a bit of the things that they say in the movie that happened, a lot of times did happen. I even heard on set, Spielberg would occasionally just be crying, and someone would go, what's going on? And he'd be like, this is exactly what happened. This is exactly like mine. And I'm sure some liberties were taken. I'm sure a lot of other stuff was left out, but I was actually surprised to see how autobiographical it was. Like I said, divorce is a big theme in all of his movies. It comes up a lot. It clearly affected him very profoundly as a child. But I also thought this movie, it seemed like kind of what was going on with Benny and his parents was almost like a polyamorous kind of relationship, where, at one point I almost wondered if it was like his dad was in a relationship with Benny or what was going on there. So I feel like maybe in a different time, they could have worked it out. They could have found a way to kind of to make it work with the three of them. But I don't know. I will say I know some polyamorous couples, and they seem to be working it out, figuring it out okay. So I don't know. Maybe it was just a matter of time. Maybe, it was hard, though. I felt really bad for the dad, because he clearly loved his wife a lot and was trying to do whatever he could to make her happy. And he couldn't. He didn't have what she needed. So, yeah, that's sad. I did like the scene with the mother dancing, but I also thought it was a little odd because she starts dancing, she's wearing sort of a see-through kind of gown. And it's not really sexual or lascivious, but it's still a little odd. And then, Benny says, oh, you should be filming this. And he turns on the camera or he turns on the lights. And then Sammy starts filming. And yeah, it was definitely a little thing. And the one daughter kind of freaks out, like, oh, what are you doing? Like, Mom, your dress is see-through. And that seemed very real to me and very realistic because I can see my sisters doing that. But also, I can't imagine being comfortable with filming my mom dancing in a see-through gown. It just, maybe Sammy's more mature than I am. And again, she's not dancing in a sexy way and she's not trying to be provocative or anything like that. And it's beautiful objectively, but yeah, there's something a little weird about filming your mom that way. Maybe it's just me, my own like weird American, upbringing, but like, yeah, definitely thought it was a little odd. I didn't realize until later, but apparently the reason he called the movie The Fabelmans and they're called The Fabelmans is because Fable and Spiel both mean story. So Spielberg, Fabelman. It's kind of cool. I like stuff with Greatest Show on Earth. It's a movie I watched a lot as a kid. Like I said, it did remind me a little bit of Dawson's Creek, which is about a kid who was obsessed with Spielberg and also wanted to make movies in high school. And of course, Dawson's Creek had Michelle Williams in it as Jen, right? So it's just kind of funny seeing her in a Spielberg movie that's very similar to the show she was on. So I mean, good for her. I'm glad that she managed to do it, but I'm sure Dawson Leary would be so jealous right now. And then That's about it. So as far as my score on this movie, I will say, I went into it maybe a little cynical, maybe a little with my expectations a little higher than they should be. And so I kind of thought it was going to be kind of sentimental and a little too cute, a little too precious for me. And it wasn't. I actually think for the most part, it worked out pretty good. And other than the things that I pointed out, a little too long and maybe some other issues, I think it was a pretty solid movie and I liked it a lot. So I think my score on this one's going to be an 8 out of 10. So if you saw the movie, then let me know what you thought of it down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have a great night. I will see you here again next week.